But I want to say thank you to our speakers, Kiley, Seth, and Dan, for being our speakers today. It's very nice to have you all here. And I also want to say thank you to the Center for European Studies here at UW-Madison at the very beginning. This event wouldn't be possible without their generous support. So thank you so much to Dr. Elizabeth Covington and Professor Sonia Kloke. And my name, I want to introduce myself too. I'm Nicole Fisher. I'm a PhD student here at UW-Madison, and I'm today's moderator. So if I'm too fast, not loud enough, too loud, just let me know and I can adjust to your needs. And then you can just see what the event is. So I hope you all are here for this event. It's the workshop on German ecological thought in the classroom. And I want to talk a little bit about today's structure. Go over there. And before I go into the details of the structure, this is a workshop. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or to raise your virtual hand. We are happy to answer questions whenever you have them. And there will be a hands-on part, but before we go to the hands-on part, we just want to have a very short introductory part. So it's going to be about the background, about the context of this workshop. Then we'll have short introductions and very, very short mini lectures about different possibilities, how to implement ecological thought into the German classroom. And we will also introduce the website that we have that can help you to implement German ecological thought into the classroom. So this is about the structure, the first part, and the second part then will be the hands-on part, and you'll go into breakout rooms, work with the speaker of today. And before we end the workshop, we want you to come back to the big room, and then we'll have a closing open discussion. And this is all I have to say about the structure. So let's go to the background. And the background is just to let you know how much is out there about Green Germany or green topics in German that make this workshop so valuable. So there was a seminar on sustainability in German studies, from ecocriticism to community engagement, at the 2019 GSA conference. And I guess this is the starting point where it all started, and step by step it took us where we are today. This seminar was then followed by a symposium at the University of Minnesota, and generated by this momentum, there was a special section in the Unterrichtspraxis on sustainability and community engagement in German studies. And one can say that all of these in-person events were so well attended, and there are 7 articles in the special section of the Unterrichtspraxis, which was just published in fall 2021, that, you know, altogether, it is just a combination of in-person events and publications exploring aspects of Green Germany. And there are other publications, just like, for example, another special section in the Unterrichtspraxis on teaching Green Germany in 2013, if you want to take a look, or the MLA anthology on foreign language teaching and the environment, which was edited by Professor Charlotte Malin in 2019. And the combination of the in-person and publication just shows how important it is to talk about Green Germany and green topics like sustainability, eco-criticism, and community engagement in the field of German studies. And so with the 3 speakers that are joining us today, we have 3 experts who want to share their expertise and their experience. And they will talk now, introduce themselves, why they're so good when talking about the topics of eco-criticism, community engagement, and language pedagogy in combination with the green topics. So please go ahead, Kiley, and do introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, and thanks to everyone at UW-Madison and the Center for European Studies for supporting this event. And thanks everyone for being here. It's such a treat to see so many people here on a Monday afternoon. My name is Kylie Kost, and I am currently a lecturer in German at Carleton College, which is in Northfield, Minnesota. That's about an hour south of Minneapolis. And I did my PhD in Germanic Studies at the University of Minnesota in 2019, and then have been at Carleton since then. And we thought we'd just give a quick overview in this self-introduction of the work that we've done in the field of eco-criticism, green Germany, and the types of courses that we teach, because as Nicole said, you'll later select breakout rooms, and this will hopefully give you an idea of the type of work that we each do. But let's see, so my research has focused on eco-criticism in general, and in specific, my dissertation looked at geologic timescales in narrative fiction. So how these enormous stories of the non-human past can be represented and narrated in different forms of fiction. And I've also published on other eco-critical topics that look at different non-human agencies, ranging from mushrooms, wild mushrooms in the forest, to the role of rain in changing landscapes and human interaction with the landscapes. I have taught a range of courses, and at Carleton, I'm lucky to be able to teach both introductory language courses, first year, second year courses, all the way to upper level seminars in German and seminars in English. Let's see, some topics include the ever beloved fairy tales and folklore class, which you can also bring ecological thinking into. I'm teaching a class right now on monsters, robots, and cyborgs. I've taught classes on sustainability in German literature and culture. And some other experience, I had a Fulbright at the Rachel Carson Center for Environment and Society in Munich, but I'll let Seth tell you more about that in just a second, though I'll hand it over to Dan now.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to note my thanks. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to be able to present and work with everyone today. And thank you, Nicole, again for organizing. My name's Dan Nolan. I teach at the University of Minnesota Duluth. I've taught here now for about a decade. My background is in German studies and Russian studies. And I did my PhD at Northwestern in comparative literary studies, where I focused mainly on 19th century work in the emerging publics of that time. When I came to UMD, I was Seth Peabody, whom you'll hear from in a moment, came here as well, and he was working on eco-criticism and doing some curriculum design that I found was inspiring. And that's really when I started developing my curriculum materials also around sustainability, and quickly saw the advantage of focusing on community engaged learning with that material. So my research has been focused on a lot of it's been on Heinrich von Kleist, but I also have done curriculum design and some research on collaborative online international learning, which you'll hear about later a little bit. And I have done some research and development in mobile language learning, which draws on my work in the digital humanities. And yeah, I think with that, I'll hand the word off to Seth Peabody.
Thank you, Dan. And just to echo everybody else, thank you, Nicole, very much for putting this together, and to the Center for German and European Studies and the University of Wisconsin-Madison for supporting this, and to all of you for attending. Yeah, I guess just really quickly about myself. I am currently an assistant professor of German at Carleton College. Kiley and I share a wall, which is exciting, especially because we've actually been collaborating with each other since neither of us had any remote affiliation with Carleton. I was in my final year of grad school as a grad student at Harvard, organizing my first ever conference, or my first GSA seminar, and Kiley was a grad student who joined that seminar on eco-criticism. And yeah, and so I've been doing that ever since. My research field, I guess my initial and still maybe my main research field, is eco-criticism dealing with German film. But I've also written some pieces on literature. I have one piece on Goethe and another piece on contemporary literature, looking at a couple of pieces by Wolfgang Herrendorf. And over the past few years, I've been thinking more and more about German pedagogy connecting to the environment, and how to bring together kind of creative thinking with eco-critical approaches, and somehow also fuse that with community engaged learning. And yeah, and I've done that at various levels. So like Kiley, I teach at all levels of the German language curriculum, and also I have a critical toolbox course that I teach, which is sort of this weird like theory seminar for undergrads that I actually quite enjoy. And yeah, the students can be really excited about ecocriticism in that course. And yeah, and I guess outside of Carleton, I'm also affiliated with the Rachel Carson Center in Munich. Like Kiley, I've had the pleasure of working there. And I worked at the University of Minnesota in both Duluth and the Twin Cities before I came down here to Northfield, Minnesota. And so I've worked with the Center for German and European Studies there as well. And so I'm really enjoying the networks available here. I also am one of the coordinators for the environmental studies network of the GSA. So it's kind of a lot of different but closely related hats, I guess. I think that's it for introductions. I'm going to pass it back to Nicole. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the introduction. And it's just a very quick transition now, because now we'll go into the mini lectures that will help us to think about how we can implement German ecological thought into the classroom. And for that, Seth will talk about ecocriticism, Kiley will talk about language pedagogy, and then we'll talk about community engagement. So please, the floor is yours again.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Right, so I'm going to introduce ecocriticism, which feels a little bit funny that I am introducing it because that's what we all do, and it's sort of all kind of integrated throughout the different areas, but that is the somewhat artificial breakdown we decided on. So the question is, how can German ecological thought be implemented into the foreign language classroom? And for me, thinking about ecocriticism, I sort of take German out and put it in parentheses and say ecological thought isn't really German. It sort of draws from all different places. And so the authors are one thing, and then the ways I approach texts are another. And German is included in all of them, but not exclusively German things. So in terms of what I do with this in the classroom, maybe I taught a film course at the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities that was centered around ideas of nature. The subtitle was Film, Nature, and Nation, and it was sort of your kind of standard national interpretation of German cinema, sort of bringing together political history, cultural history, and film. And I actually just finished the monograph I've been working on for too long to deal with that whole topic. Thank you. But the way I've started working on it since then has been less tied to sort of a content area than I might write a scholarly monograph in a German studies series about, and more thinking about how I can bring this into different pieces of the curriculum that are already there. And it's ironic that Dan said that I inspired his work in Duluth, because he then inspired my work down here in Northfield, where I put together a class that was on green Germany. It was already on the books when I took a visiting job at St. Olaf College across the river. And so I taught that class, and I was going to teach a literature kind of thinking about German environmental ideas class. And my chair said, no, this is an outreach class. We need to get the engineering students in. You lead with technology. And so it wound up being like the Energiewende at the beginning, and then we'll bring culture into it and make it this nicely integrated thing. And I tried that. And I have heard Dan talk a lot about it since then. And I really like hearing Dan talk about it because it's good and it's ongoing. And for me, it was frustrating because it felt like I was trying to do this like technological solutions approach to a German literature class. And it just felt like I wasn't actually building on my own strengths or my own approaches. Like what skills am I uniquely situated to help my students develop? And so since then, I've sort of shifted a little bit in my approach and have been really thinking about what can interpretation, what can creativity bring to discussions of climate change, bring to sort of holistic approaches to environmental thinking. And it's wound up coming in at a whole bunch of different levels of scales and levels within the curriculum. So for example, I had a whole course I taught on environmental thought in the US and Germany. And I had students do this whole city symphony project where they built their own little small town symphony about Northfield, but then wrote an analysis of it, thinking about like discussing it in relation to the environmental ideas from the class. That was in a course in English. In German, I taught just a unit on environmentalism in contemporary Germany, but we focused on like satire and kind of popular YouTube channels that have really engaging and creative ways of presenting environmental information. And then I assigned my students to make that type of video. So some of them did like YouTuber style, just like science slam videos. Some did satires that I thought were just tremendous. Some did poems. I've had a couple of really spectacular like slam poetry performances from my students. I judged them as spectacular because, you know, I was excited to see my assignment lead to something like that. But yeah, what I've found is that when I've done this kind of project, it has really led the students to like come alive in a way that I feel like I can help them to do. Whereas the technology solutions oriented piece, I felt like I was kind of running into a wall where students wanted to do more than they could in the span of our very short 10-week course at Carleton College. And yeah, and just in terms of managing not only their expectations, but also the skills that they can expect to get from my class, like that is a balance that takes a lot of work. And you will hear from Dan shortly about, I think, a really good approach to that. But what I saw in my class is that I got this kind of change in affect almost, where I do these like, so tell me your emotions. This is like a German language Zoom class. Tell me your emotions when we think about the environment. I'm introducing the unit. And it's all like Angst and hoffnungslos and things like that. And then we do the projects, and I did feedback at the end, and students sort of like had engaged in a way where like there had been small changes in this like emotional response. So that's the kind of thing, not only in like, I'm trying to somehow do like media therapy with my students, but just to think about like, what are the ways to activate one's own thinking and one's own work. So I have a critical theory class that actually did ecocriticism as a semi-unit at the end. And that also students just found exciting. It was a way to think in creative ways. So I don't do a whole lot of Lawrence Buell, like first wave eco-criticism, like thinking about the environment. 1 minute, thank you. My alarm is also going off. Instead, I lean into like post-colonial eco-criticism, Rob Nixon, slow violence, and also Nicole Seymour, kind of ironic eco-criticism, and what does humor offer to this mix? And the students really seem to like light up when they start thinking in those ways. And my final challenge, and this is kind of what I'm working on, so if it winds up being a workshop for me as well in the breakout room, this is my goal, is how to bring it then back together to something that is in fact still serving the community. So when I did the class that Dan inspired, the city of Northfield was working on a climate action plan. I had my students research topics in Germany and then report to the city council, basically. So like the structure was really cool. It just in the context of my course, it felt like it wasn't working. But now I'm thinking, can I do that same kind of a thing with these humanities approaches? Thinking about like, how do students experience a sense of home in Northfield? What changes in the context of climate change, or in the context of like the look of the city changing because of sustainability initiatives? And how can these kind of affective measures be then taken into account by environmental groups that are working so hard and have been going for a long time to kind of make this into a sustainable city? So I'm plugging back in the fall, hopefully with a new course I'm designing with humanities questions at the core. Yeah, that's my introduction. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Seth. And I'll talk a little bit about how I incorporate environmental thinking or ecological thinking into language classes, German language classes in particular. Though, as Seth said, this is a strange, this three-way divide that we have here today doesn't clearly represent how we've all worked together and how these different areas influence each individual research area and teaching area that we have. But I really enjoy talking about how instructors of German can engage with these complex environmental topics in, yes, first and second year German classes. And I think a lot of people may shy away from doing this because there's perhaps an assumption that you need to have specialized vocabulary to think about environmental topics or issues dealing with sustainability. And what I'm trying to think about is how we can actually use the target language to investigate these very basic assumptions about the environment. If you think about your first year language curriculum, basically everything that you learned that you learn or that the students learn intersects with the environment in some way. So whether that's food or clothing or like housing, transit, city, all of these topics you can approach from an environmental angle. And should you be interested in our special section in the Unterrichtspraxis, you can read the article that Seth and I co-authored, and we break this down into an idea called critical environmental thinking, which just suggests that you do not need specialized vocabulary to think critically about the environment in the target language. And when we're thinking about this, Seth was just mentioning the humanities approach and how that can sometimes get away from us when we talk about environmental issues. And we, again, try and bring that back and really ground what we do in culture and looking at the cultural context of these different daily practices that also intersect with environmental issues, with environmental systems. That may seem kind of broad and nebulous right now, but I would encourage you to take a look at your textbook that you use. And now that some of the more recently published textbooks are getting a little bit better at realizing that all of these topics do intersect with environmental issues, but otherwise you can go through and make your own lessons to bring this into the classroom, even in first and second year German classes. And I want to talk briefly too about upper level seminars in German, still keeping this somehow under the umbrella of language pedagogy, because I feel like, oh, you're teaching them in German, so you can, I can still talk about this here. And I have in the past and right now used a broad approach to think about how I can bring environmental humanities topics into, or like create whole courses about environmental humanities topics. I mentioned the one I'm teaching now on monsters, robots, and cyborgs. Like this is secretly a class about post-humanism and non-humans, but at least where I'm teaching, if I were to put that in the course title, no one would really enroll in the class. I'm sure you've all had similar, face similar problems in naming your courses. So how can we bring these topics in a bit more subtly? For other examples, I taught a class in winter 2020 on catastrophe and natural disaster, looking at literary representations of these natural disasters, which led right into the start of the pandemic, which was a bit eerie. And another class on environment and sustainability in German literature. And in these classes, I work a lot with film and with images and with transforming different types of narratives and texts. We'll talk about that in my breakout groups, how you can do these transformative exercises in your classroom. So yeah, in my breakout group, we'll think about how to encourage students and lead them to think critically about environmental topics as it's connected to what you already teach in your language classes. And then I'll hand it to Dan.
Thank you, and thank you, Kiley and Seth. So I'll talk about community engaged learning here for a few minutes, and then, as the other speakers have noted, we'll have breakout groups where we'll get into these three topics. And as each has noted, right, this is an artificial division. The group that you're hearing from today, as Nicole touched on a little bit, has really come together around the perception that, one, that there's great work being done in German studies, in ecocriticism, for sure. In language pedagogy, we have an immense strength in our field, and we have a great deal of expertise out there, and a lot of fresh work is continually coming out of German studies and language pedagogy. That's really exciting. And the same thing's true for community engaged learning. The community engaged learning and sustainability focused education, these are kind of buzzwords on campuses across the US and beyond now. And right, one simple way of summarizing what we've done in this working group with Nicole and Seth and Kiley is that we brought these together. And that's somewhat simplistic, but as you've heard from the other presenters, behind each of these areas is an entire field into itself, and it takes a long time to learn yourself up on these topics. And that's been my experience in getting excited about doing sustainability focused curriculum development, German studies, and then bringing that to our community here in Duluth, and then to some communities in German speaking countries. And so I'll focus now in on what that is, what's community engaged learning. But I'll do so in the context of that perception, as Seth noted. We saw this great intellectual strength in eco-criticism, and we saw some emerging work in community engaged learning. And the gap between the two is really what we're trying to address in this working group. And we'll invite you to think about addressing that gap in some active development here in our workshops and our breakouts. So community engaged learning is really exciting stuff. First of all, I think the first thing to note is that if you haven't thought about doing some community engaged learning in some of the courses that you're thinking about developing, then I want to encourage you to do so. And it involves making some big shifts in the way that we think about higher education. I think you can say that pretty safely. Higher education happens in many instances within the contexts and within the confines of these wonderful things we call universities and colleges. And when we step outside of that bubble, a number of remarkable things happen. One of them is that we look back and we see that our universities are often not designed to address societal problems. And that's just remarkable. It's remarkable, and it presents a problem that folks who do community engaged learning are trying to address. And so the first thing that you want to do when you're thinking about community engaged curriculum design is to simply ask that question: what can my students bring to an issue, that a set of needs that exist in the communities around me? And for a lot of people in German studies, that's difficult because you might not live in an area where people speak German, of course. So, Seth and Nicole and Kiley, we've spent some time thinking about this, and we want to hand on, the benefit that we're hoping to bring in this workshop is just that. So we've spent, not that we have some great answers, but that we spent a lot of time working on this. We found some amazing things that work across the curriculum, from first year to those upper division courses. So developing community engaged learning involves doing backwards course design, of course, and looking at the learning goals and specifically community engaged learning goals. So when we're working with community organizations, one, we are learning that we can have an impact, that our fields can really bring benefit to existing efforts, to existing projects. Especially in something like German studies and sustainability, we often see that what we're bringing is a cultural dimension to these existing projects, and that especially with sustainability, when we step off our campus, we find that sustainability work is different outside the campus than it is on the campus. We don't have the same kind of support. We don't have the same kind of willingness to engage with the cultural dimension of sustainability when we're off campus. And when our students propose that, looking at the history of a particular discourse, whether it be recycling efforts or water protection, or the ways in which CSAs are run in our communities, the cultural dimension of those projects is there. No one would deny that, but addressing it in an intentional way is often not within the reach of a leader of a community organization. And so you need to make that pitch. You need to bring that ability to touch on an interest that exists in your community and tie that to the efforts of your course. And that is something that I think all of us have in this working group have done successfully. And I'll talk a little bit about one of the ways that I've done it, especially in the breakout. But here, very briefly, I want to note that I do have a background of working with working in community engaged learning and in German studies. So I've run and developed some community projects around refugee resettlement. We live in a country that is also dealing with refugee resettlement needs, and is back in 2016 in the wake of the war in Syria. We, of course, you will be well familiar with the refugee resettlement situation in Germany in 2016, 2017, 2018. And so we tapped into some local community partners there, brought them to campus, and then brought in other folks in our region working on refugee resettlement. And that was a really interesting project for me. And in Russian studies, I ran a Russian studies program for several years. And I did some community engaged learning there focused on children's welfare. We did an exchange in social work and brought people back and forth from the United States and Russia with a State Department grant. And that allowed me to develop some skills that I think are also an important component of a successful community engaged learning project. As they get bigger, you really will rely on those partners. And so in the breakout room, I'll talk about what does it mean to develop good partners? And I'll draw on a resource that Nicole shared in her article in the Unterrichts Praxis special section on evaluating those community partners and whether or not your organization is really ready to support over a longer term a relationship that has the characteristics that you might need to be successful. So wrapping up, in the breakout room, I'll introduce a toolkit that you can use in developing a community engaged learning project, whether it be a course or an assignment, right? And so we're going to look also at that scale from entry level, smaller, very small community engaged projects to the very exciting but certainly onerous course that is at its core, or at least in many sections, community engaged. We'll look at that partnership development piece. We'll look at the efficiency of course design. If you're not really attentive to efficiency in community engaged learning, it's very easy for things to get out of hand. And we'll look at the way that student motivation can be tapped into. When you're doing community engaged learning, you do have an ability to get traction with students in a way that is not always possible. And you can utilize that, and you need to also be cautious about it. There are also political dimensions to really engaging with that strong strong student interest that we see in these community engaged learning projects. So I'll leave it there for now and hand the word back to Nicole. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for all the mini lectures. And I just want to show you a tool that can help you to implement green topics for all the reasons that we heard now. So we heard, you can do it on all different levels, and you should do it because it's such a big part of our everyday life, because we're exposed to how important green topics are. And because it's so important to the four of us, we worked on a website, and I can just post the link in the chat, but I will also share my screen with you to show you a few examples what you will find on the website. So, Kiley mentioned it, that not every book has a section on green topics in it, but what you can do is you can simply go to this website and take a look at it and browse around, poke around, and find different material that you can download and adjust to your own needs, because all the material that you see there is free and it's on a Creative Commons basis. So, you can really adjust it to your own needs. And just to show you how you can implement it on a very small or beginner level, I want to show you a language pedagogy worksheet. And this is just me clicking through the website. And it's the Denkanstoß Nachhaltigkeit. So this is a very easy activity that you can do in 2 minutes in your class. And you can see how all of our material is structured. So you'll find the most important information on this landing pages, so you can see what level it will be in, on what is the description, what are the learning goals, and does it fit into my schedule, into my classroom or not. And here we have the worksheet that you can then download and work on. And you can scale it up or you can scale it down. It's very easy. It just says, die Nachhaltigkeit, schreibe eine Definition, and you can write it in German, or you can talk about it in German and write it in English. You know, you can just use it, whatever is best for your class. And then you have a few follow-up questions. And here it is. Wie nachhaltig war die letzte Unterrichtsstunde? Überlege dir, welche und wie viele Ressourcen verbraucht wurden. Ist das viel oder wenig? Is this dem Resultat angemessen? And this is probably more advanced, but you can scale it down and even just ask a 101 student, a beginner student, what kind of transportation did you use today and how sustainable was the transportation? Because transportation, most of the time, is already part of 101 or the beginner level class. So this is what you can find. And on the different side of the spectrum, you can also find a whole syllabus on the website, and I just opened it up already. This is in the community engagement part of our website. So, you know, here you can just scroll down and download a whole syllabus with a community engagement aspect to it. And then you can even go through the syllabus, and because you can download it, you can adjust it to your own needs. So you can change the times, you can change the in-class unit part, you can change it to more time, to less time, whatever works best for you. So you can really find from a 2-minute activity to a whole syllabus. You can just go to the website and try to find the best material for your class. And what's great about this website too is that it's not static. So we're not gonna spoon feed you what we think is the best, but you can also come up with your own ideas and you can upload it on the website. So it's a dynamic process. And it is also kind of community engagement, right? So we're a community, you show up because green topics are important to you. And if you have just an activity, you can submit it. And it's kind of edited process or curated process. So one of you will work with you so that we can put it on the website with your name and you're happy with it. So this is just an idea what you can come up with during the breakout rooms too. So what's the idea with the breakout rooms is everything is possible, but you don't have to do it if you don't want to do it. And before we go into a breakout rooms, we just want to give you some time for first questions. And if we go into the breakout rooms, they're going to be 3, and we're going to have Dan in the community engagement breakout room, Seth in the ecocriticism breakout room, and Kiley in the language pedagogy breakout room. And in the breakout room, you can decide what you want to do. So you're going to go there. It's going to be first a discussion, what you want to do, what you want to achieve during the 30 minutes breakout room time. And then, you know, we can take it from there. But